Hi, I'm Eric Benfeld with Virginia Cooperative Extension, Virginia Tech, and I'm for the soil, both for my children and future generations, viable agriculture, local waterways, and the protection of natural resources. Thank you for being part of this conversation and the For the Soil podcast.
Hello, everybody. I'm Jeff Ishii, and welcome to another episode of For the Soil, a conversation. My co-host Mary Sketch Bryant and Eric Benfelt, they'll be joining us in just a couple of moments here as we introduce a special guest. Quick reminder that on Tuesday, June 23rd, is National Soil Health Day. It's observed annually on June 23rd in the United States. It was established in 2019 by Acres USA, and it recognizes the farmers, the growers, the soil professionals who implement sustainable practices to replenish and enhance global soil health. So once again, Tuesday, June 23rd is National Soil Health Day, and our guest on that episode will be Dr. Ray Weil with the University of Maryland. Now to this week's episode. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of For the Soil, a Conversation. I'm your host, Jeff Ishii, along with co-host Eric Benfelt with Virginia Cooperative Extension Community Viability and Mary Sketch Bryant with the Virginia Soil Health Coalition. We are welcoming back as part 2 episode of the podcast, Lauren Hines-Acosta. And Eric, if you would do some further introduction, please.
Yes, we're pleased to have Lauren back for a second episode. Lauren's a journalist with the Chesapeake Bay Journal and has done a lot of research, and she's specifically based in Virginia. And we'd like to talk with Lauren about some of the emerging issues and technologies that she's tracking as that relates to soil health. So welcome, Lauren.
Hey, happy to be here.
Yeah, we covered a lot of ground in the first part. We talked about menhaden fisheries. We talked about forestry conversation. We talked a little bit about, several of the articles that you have written. Once again, for our listeners who are not aware, bayjournal.com. That's bayjournal.com. That is a 501c3 nonprofit news organization. And Lauren, you had mentioned in part 1 the topic of biosolids. That is a mystery word for a lot of our listeners. Of course, some of our listeners are very familiar with biosolids. Can you help us to define what are biosolids and what are the issues when it comes to the environment?
Yeah, for sure. So biosolids are sanitized sewage sludge. So like poop. But so they're used as a cheaper fertilizer for a lot of farms. So it's a great option for a lot of farmers to try and save costs. But the emerging issue is that a lot of these biosolids are oftentimes contaminated with forever chemicals, which are basically these compounds that are really hard to break down naturally. And many compounds, there's about like 14,000 different ones, but many of them are linked to health effects. And so a lot of advocates are trying to make the state address PFAS, but so far the state won't until EPA finalizes its guidelines. So I can get more into that, but that's kind of the highlights.
And Lauren, I know we're recording this episode, here in General Assembly is still in session and things could change, but like, in Virginia, what's kind of the status of what they're thinking about?
Yeah.
What's going on there regarding biosolids?
Yeah, so there's a couple bills in session right now that are still alive. We're post crossover right now, so the other chambers are considering the other chambers bills. But Senator Stewart out in, I believe he represents the Northern Neck kind of area. He has a bill out that says there should be limitations to the amount of PFAS in biosolids that are applied, and that's on the onus of the applicator, not the farmer. Most people I've talked to when it comes to biosolids are really keeping the farmer in mind because it affects their health and their the product they put out because of PFAS transfers or the forever chemicals transfer. So yeah, we'll see. There has been some bipartisanship to address this issue, but the level of aggressiveness will be determined.
And Lauren, we've often, well, with the four principles, we talk about keeping the soil covered, and another principle is energizing with diversity, and with that, encouraging the planting and management of cover crops. And we've seen, people that have might plant one cover crop, rye, barley, but then we also see more people planting a pretty diverse mix. I think 10, 11, 12, and other states maybe as high as 20 or more. You've also mentioned how technology might be used to uh, actually detect how much nitrogen and how cover crops are helping the Chesapeake Bay. If you could speak more to that.
Yeah, so I'm working on a story right now diving into this new, well, this new to the Bay technology. It's out of, well, the Nature Conservancy help kind of coordinate it, but there's a group out of North Carolina, yeah, North Carolina State University championing this. But so it's a tool that uses AI to analyze photos taken along people's farms. And so these photos are of the cover crops. And then the AI is trained to identify which crop is which and um, all of that. And then it goes through a calculation based on a couple of databases. It takes in like the soil health, composition, and then the weather data and some other things and what we know about the nitrogen makeup of the particular cover crop. So it calculates all of it to kind of give a farmer an idea of how much nitrogen are they getting out of this mix of cover crops. That way they can more precisely apply fertilizer. And I just want to say, before AI became a buzzword, this is a typical use of how AI was used that I saw when I was working at research centers. It's really to do the grunt work of a grad student. So yeah, it's a cool technology.
That's really neat. And I know there's some conversations in Virginia around some similar approaches where what sounds like, Lauren, you're saying is it's going to benefit the farmer where they can save on their fertilizer bills. And then there's the Chesapeake Bay benefits too, where it's ultimately
Mhm.
so it's kind of a win-win. And using technology, we know that technical assistance has we're limited in the amount of capacity we have there. So it's neat to see some of the ways that technology is being used both for environmental and economic benefits. Where else are you seeing in the Bay, specifically related to soil health and agriculture, but technology being used?
I know there's modeling has been used a lot in looking at how much nitrogen from a lot of sources, including agriculture, is entering the Chesapeake Bay. I think it's called the CAST model. The Chesapeake Bay program uses it, which is kind of a committee of sorts of all the Bay states. But that model is getting kind of revisited because models, right, it's predictive based off of, you know, estimated data. It's to give a good idea, but at least Virginia is moving towards trying to do more actual observed decreases in nitrogen than estimated or predicted as these scientific models do. So there is a program called Pay for Outcomes. Kind of gets into the nitty-gritty, but the key aspect of it is that people will come to the state and be like, hey, I have this kind of different idea on how to decrease nitrogen. It may not be your typical cover crops or tree buffers on my farm or cattle fencing, but it's something new. And then they will see, they will try it and measure it. the decline. And if they actually do deliver on the promise of X pounds of nitrogen decreased, then they get paid by the state. So it's to ensure that what the declines we hope we're seeing, we're actually seeing from ag and other places.
We're talking today with Lauren Hines-Acosta. She is a journalist with the Bay Journal Media, which is a 501c3 nonprofit news organization. Their web address is bayjournal.com. Once again, that's bayjournal.com. And Lauren, as a fellow journalist, I hope that you'll do a little bit of role playing with me for just a second
Okay.
here. I'm going to be your assignment editor for just a moment,
Oh,
okay?
okay.
I'm going to send you out to do a story on the topic of how artificial intelligence can improve soil health.
Mhm.
Who would you want to talk to? What would be your resources? Kind of help me to flesh out how you might cover this story, how artificial intelligence may improve soil health. So there you go. That's your assignment.
Oof, okay. Let's see. Well, I'd probably jump on Google Scholar first, and just see like what research is out there. And then from there, I'll do a little reading and then look at the authors. And if I see an author pop up quite a few times, then it's like, okay, this is kind of their jam. And I'll reach out to that scientist and kind of start there. So I always do kind of my own little research and then try to talk to the experts in that realm. So yeah, I'd probably end up talking to somebody from an extension or Penn State or Virginia Tech. But if it's outside of the Bay, sometimes I'll go with that. But for this, keep it in the Bay. So yeah, that's probably how I would start that assignment.
I certainly think that is a topic that is going to have to be covered at some point because having just went to a farm conference last week, a lot of farmers were talking about AI and
Yeah.
about how these new tractors have AI built into them
Mm,
and can actually sense the humidity in the air, the density of the soil, the fertility of the soil. It's really a digital world that farmers are living in now, but that is a topic that I think probably should be covered in the near future. Eric, I know you had a question.
Yes, Lauren, this might relate to AI as well, but a long time ago, Jeff and I, in collaboration with the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, we went to Tangier Island for a weekend just to understand what water men or water communities are facing. And another issue I think that's emerging too is the intrusion of salt water into
mm,
farm fields and the salinization of fields that, whereas fields used to be fairly productive because of the buildup of salt, it's affecting farmers' yields, but then also they might actually have to take it out of production because of sort of something that we're a little bit harder to see. I don't know if you've heard more about that.
a little bit, yeah. My colleague Jeremy has been covering that a ton. He's out on the Eastern Shore near Salisbury. And the Eastern Shore in Virginia, I believe, is maybe produces the most, or has the most agricultural land. Or they produce a lot of agricultural products in this state. There's a heavy agricultural area, I believe. So yeah, I could totally seen that it be an issue with sea level rise, that salinity encroaching on farmland and is becoming another obstacle for farmers to face. So I can't speak too much on it, but you can look up Jeremy's articles on bayjournal.com about that.
And I know we just have a couple minutes left, Lauren, but any other stories that are on your radar or topics that tied to egg and soil health that you want to put out there for our listenership to keep an eye out for?
So yeah, I'm putting together a story looking at conservation easements And I know this isn't super soil health, but I know a lot of farmers, think about putting their land into conservation to, get some money out the land, but mostly to preserve it. And my story would be looking into what are the legal limits of easements, as there's a lot of pressures to turn that land that's under easement into a solar site or a data center site. So far, I found that the easements seem fairly impenetrable, but I'm in the early stages, so keep an eye out for that.
Very interesting. So many topics to cover in the world of the environment and the natural sciences. But I want to thank you for your time, Lauren. I greatly appreciate everything that you do, and I want to thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Lauren Hines-Acosta, with a journalist with Bay Journal Media, a 501c3 nonprofit news organization. Once again, their web address is bayjournal.com. That is bayjournal.com, and there you'll be able to read several articles written and published by Lauren Hines-Acosta. Mary and Eric, we'll catch you in the next one.
Thank you so much, Jeff and Lauren. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you both.
And another quick reminder, if I may, we would greatly appreciate it if you would consider subscribing to this podcast or liking it, depending on which podcast platform that you're using. You know what to do. Subscribe and like the podcast. That helps us out greatly, and we truly appreciate your interest in this podcast. For the Soil Conversation is made possible with funding support from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and the Agua Fund. Other partners include the USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service, Virginia Cooperative Extension, Virginia State University, Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation, and partners of the Virginia Soil Health Coalition. Views expressed on this podcast are those of each individual guest. To download a copy of this or any other episode, visit the website forthesoil.org. If you have a specific question about soil health, just call your local extension office, your local USDA service center, or a Soil and Water Conservation District office. Music used during today's program was provided courtesy of the Flip Charts, all rights reserved. For the Soil, a Conversation is produced by On the Farm Radio in collaboration with Virginia Tech. I'm your host, Jeff Ishii.